Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, Senior News Editor at Retail Insider. Joining me today is Doug Stevens, founder of Retail Profit. Thanks for joining us today, Doug.
It's my pleasure, Mario. Thanks for having me.
Well, you recently spoke at the RCC Retail Council of Canada Store Conference, and intriguing topic that you had, the recapturing the art of retail in an era of technology-driven innovation. Let's first talk about, Doug, why is it necessary? Like, what do we have to recapture?
It's a great question. There are a tremendous number of things today in the environment that are demanding a retailer's attention. It's no secret to say that, there have been massive societal changes, obviously, through the pandemic. The whole issue of work from home versus work in the office, and the effect that that has on commuting patterns and businesses is certainly something to pay attention to. I think there are new corporate table stakes in terms of issues of diversity and inclusion that companies are now having to sort of wrap their heads around. Technology at the foreground now with AI. Barely an hour goes by we don't hear something about AI or robotics. So tremendous number of things that are vying for a retailer's attention. But it's been my experience that the one thing that most retailers, and I would say most businesses, let's open it up to all businesses, face today is the ongoing challenge of, number one, capturing a customer's attention, holding it, and then hopefully producing a memorable experience that drives disproportionate recall vis-a-vis their competitors. So, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what retailers want. They want the attention of consumers, and they want to be top of mind when the occasion arises that the consumer needs that product again. And most retailers, in fact, are falling down when it comes to that. So I felt that there was room for a deeper exploration into that, because frankly, if you're not getting the attention of consumers, and if consumers not remembering their experience with you, none of the other stuff really matters.
So when you talk about the art of retail, I'm just curious of the choice of phrase there, the art. Why use that phrase?
Well, what I found curious is that, whereas I may not really remember very much about the shoe buying experience I had a week ago, I can hear the first few notes of a song from 40 years ago, and it's right there in my memory, right?
Oh, I hear you.
I can get together with family and recite lines from movies that we all enjoyed, or you may remember, the first Broadway musical you ever went to see. So it struck me that, our brains really seem to want to retain art. But when it comes to commerce, most of it is very forgettable. So I, first of all, wondered, what is it about art that makes it so sticky, that makes our brains respond so positively to it? And I found two things, really. Art is really a form of storytelling. If anything, it's an immersive form of storytelling, whether we're seeing a movie, a play, listening to a song, looking at a piece of fine art in a gallery. There's a story being communicated to us. And as human beings, stories go very, very deep into who we are as humans. We learn through storytelling. We incite belonging and affiliation through storytelling. I mean, really, that's what politics is. We evolve as a society through the sharing of these stories, and so art is very good at doing that. Most retail isn't. Most retailers, they may have a mission statement on their website somewhere that, we aim to make the lives of all Canadians better and more fulfilling. Well, okay, fine, but what does that mean, right? What does that mean to the average consumer out there? How does it anchor into a need that they may have, whether that's a need for belonging, a need for entertainment, a need for expertise, or just the need for a great design of a product.
Yeah.
Most corporate mission statements don't really tell a story that connects deeply to a consumer need. And furthermore, most of these mission or purpose statements aren't things that we can operationalize. I'll give you an example. When Apple came to the market, good Lord, when was that? In the early 2000s, they began to open Apple stores. The mission was pretty clear. It was think different, think different. And that mission not only anchored to a consumer need for a product in the market that was engineered differently, that worked differently, that looked differently. So it was connecting with a consumer need, but it was also something that Apple could operationalize through every aspect of what it did, right from the engineering of the product, right down to the look and feel of their stores and the way that they went about executing those experiences in a way that you just simply couldn't deny. It was different. And so the whole story was really playing out for the consumer, and it was something that consumers could connect with instantly.
So, technology has changed a lot of our behaviors and consumer behaviors in how we buy things. Has it changed what we buy?
Well, I mean, certainly our lives are filled with technology now that has become sort of commonplace. It's sort of the necessary tools of survival. And so from that standpoint, we're certainly buying more technology. But your question is a good one. Has technology, although it's made shopping perhaps more efficient, right? It's maybe saved us some time in terms of searching for what we're looking for, but has it really made a difference in why we buy? And moreover, has it really driven a greater desire to buy on our part? And I would argue that the answer is no. And for that very reason, technology is, just as it is in art, if we think about the movies for a second, movies like Avatar are very reliant on technology. Movies like Lord of the Rings sort of pushed the envelope in terms of what was technologically possible, but they weren't movies about technology.
Yeah.
They were movies about stories and characters that people wanted to identify with, and stories that they wanted to become immersed in. That's the difference. I think retailers that say, look, we're installing technology that is just for technology's sake, aren't really fulfilling any articulated consumer need, And so the way I look at technology now is that I think it's phenomenal, and I'm certainly not suggesting that retailers become Luddites and sit on the fence when it comes to technology. But the key thing is, once you know what your story is, you can use technology in a much more surgical way to actually help bring the story to life. So if we think about that for a second, let's look at two brands. Let's take Dyson, for example, the tremendous engineering brand, just massive in terms of their ability to create beautiful, kind of magical products using technology. And let's contrast that against Patagonia. So Patagonia, of course, is a social warrior, environmental steward, very much on the front lines of the environmental battle. Now let's say both of these companies are considering the use of AI, right? What is Dyson going to use AI for? My guess would be they're probably going to use it as an advanced method of determining where there may be bugs or flaws in their product design, because they're so reliant on engineering. In Patagonia's case, they may use AI to work through their supply chains and find inefficiencies or places where their carbon footprint is exceeding their goals.
Yeah.
So, once you understand who you are, what your purpose is, and what the story is that spills out of that, all of a sudden technological decisions become much, much easier to make.
Now, what with the I guess the acceleration of technology over the last few years, especially, um, have we lost that human element in retail? In terms of you know, even just in-store experience of having talking to an associate or a person that's in a store. Have we lost that, and how important is the human element in all this when it comes to retail?
I think it's vitally important. And this is really where the retention piece comes in. Story is what gets our attention,
Yeah.
but it's ultimately the experience that we have that builds retention. And so
Hmm.
when you look at the way the brain works, going to your point about connecting with people, our brains, when we think about someone remembering an experience in store, we think of that as one thing. Our memory is sort of this single bank that we store all of these experiences in. But in fact, the memory is fed by about 5 different tributaries. And those tributaries are what we call the iconic memory, so the things that we are seeing, the auditory memory, the things that we are hearing, gustatory memory, or the things that we're tasting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we also have the tactile memory, things that we're touching. So we have a number of different memory sources that are feeding into the brain. Our iconic memory, what we are seeing, only accounts for about 20% of what we actually take away from an experience.
Hmm.
What I find ironic about that is that when you speak to most retailers and you say, so tell me about your new stores, what is it that's exciting about them? They will almost inevitably defer to the look of the store. Well, we changed the fixturing and we changed the design and we changed the navigation. And it's all about the look. What they're leaving out are the 80% of things, what I'm hearing in the store, what I'm smelling in the store, maybe an opportunity to taste or touch something. And these are really vitally important aspects of the experience that will drive enormously greater recall if we incorporate them. There's a reason that IKEA serves meatballs, and it's not just to sell meatballs, right? Yeah. It's to build the gustatory memory. There's a reason that Apple put hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory out on tables for people to abuse. And that's because of the tactile memory that it would reinforce. So when we talk about retail experience, I think sometimes we feel like, well, that's nice, but at the end of the day, we're in business to sell things. Well, guess what? You sell more when people remember who you are and remember they had a fantastic experience.
So, when we look and talking about this, we're talking, mostly about retailers themselves, right? I'm wondering, if we could talk a little bit on this discussion on a broader scale on, taking a look at, say, shopping centers. Is it the same for them? Like, and what they have to do, what we've talked about, what you've talked about just now?
Absolutely. And you sort of, to put that in context, because it's such a good question, when you look back at the shopping center, if we can think back, to the even 30, 40 years, the shopping center was really the center of life in a lot of communities. It was really the commercial center. It's where we went to buy most things, but it was also a cultural center. It was where we went to meet up with friends or spend the afternoon with our families. We would go to the mall. In the cold, hard light of 2023, the shopping center has really lost a lot, certainly a lot of the commercial value that it once had, because, this is the biggest store in the world right here. And secondly, as a cultural meeting place, online has replaced it in many ways as well. So if we don't need to go to shopping centers anymore just to visit stores, and we don't need them as places to meet and socialize, then what are they? How can they drive traffic? And I think you're right. by incorporating this notion of story. When we think about, say, a Valentine's Day rolls around, and every shopping mall will have, Valentine's Day specials and sales and that sort of thing. But why not something better than that, right? Why not an event that is all about love and kindness and, the act of finding the perfect partner or spouse, and build out a story that becomes something that people want to go see and be part of, and include food in that and fragrances and things that you can touch and see and learn and do. Now you're talking about a reason that people might want to go to a shopping center. And this is actually yet another project that I'm working on at the moment is actually building out a resource in that area.
So, obviously there's been a tremendous amount of change in retail and when it comes to technology in the last few years. What's next? What's next for technology and retail and the use of technology?
I think the biggest shift that I observe right now is that we are going certainly through another technological revolution that I would say is sort of akin to what we saw around 2008, 2009 with the advent of social media, mobile marketing, location-based marketing, location awareness. We've got a new kind of bevy of technologies now that are coming to the market. I think, though, that having gone through the pandemic and with a lot of businesses now very speculative about the economy on both sides of the border, I think there's a new level of pragmatism on the one hand. So I think there's an openness to AI, but it's not just sort of a kind of a Pollyanna, yeah, sure, that sounds great kind of attitude. It's okay, I understand it in principle, but I really want to make sure that this is something that is not only going to improve our business, but potentially won't be harmful to our customers either. Because I think a lot of companies are feeling the sting that social media has become, and the ill effects that has had on society. So I think there's just sort of a new kind of sober pragmatism around technology. That doesn't mean it doesn't mean that companies are not investing or not curious, but it does mean that they're going into it, I think, this time with maybe eyes that are a little wider open.
Mm-hmm. So, Doug, is there anything that I failed to ask you that did you want to mention, specifically from your talk recently at the RCC STORE conference?
Not really. I just, I guess my only encouragement for your audience, Mario, is that, we really, when we think about experience, when we think about what the ultimate customer experience looks like for our brands, we can't just sort of say, well, we have flagship stores and that's where the experience is, or we have a really cool interactive pop-up because that's where the experience is, because that's not true. The experience, if you're Shoppers Drug Mart, the experience is happening right now in hundreds or thousands of locations across this country. And what's happening in those moments is what will determine whether your brand succeeds or fails. It's not going to be because you had a beautiful flagship store on Bloor Street in Toronto. That is not going to seal your success. So experience really has to be something that is scalable and incorporated into every location in some way, shape, or form in order for it to be effective.
All right. Thanks, Doug. Quick question. I'm curious because you did talk about music and lyrics. What's the disc and the guitar behind you about?
Oh, well, I'm a guitarist, a struggling guitarist with an unrequited love for music, and these are actually a couple of limited prints that my wife bought me for my birthday. They are original paintings that were produced for us. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. I was curious. Thanks, Doug, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mario. I appreciate it.
All right, that was Doug Stevens, who is founder of Retail Profit. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, senior news editor of Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.